the juke joint represents the safe space the way the black church does.
Because there's not a monolithic, homogenous aspect of blackness.
People forget that DEI really was supposed to be a corrective to 250 years of slavery, 90 years of Jim Crow.
Who wore a purse, but their money was in their bra.
That still goes on
The
now.
All Rev'd Up podcast, one of the 15 top WGBH podcasts on the web.
We're back. This is the All Rev'd Up podcast, season 9, episode 1. And I'm Reverend Emmett Price.
I'm Reverend Irene Monroe.
Irene, 2025 ended in a whirlwind of chaos and calamity, and 2026 seems to begin with an addendum or an appendage or an allonge. Irene, I've been reading and brushing up on my vocabulary during the break. What did you do over the break?
I got out of the country and went to the Galapagos and was pondering, should I come back?
Oh my goodness, I'm so glad you did. And I'm certain that our viewers and our listeners are glad that you did too. Well, before we jump into this much anticipated season 9 and our much needed conversation on the audacity of hope, we must pause and thank our sponsors. Not only us, Irene, but Africana Studies at Berkeley and the Black Christian Experience Resource Center. Thank you for taking the risk on 2 loving pastors with something to say. We especially thank each of our listeners and viewers who have been on us about when are we coming back. So we're here because of you. Thank you for listening to us on the various podcast apps and for watching the actual live recording on the podcast on our YouTube channel. Thank you for your support, your encouragement, your feedback, your reviews, and your comments. And thank you so much for sharing the podcast with others.
It's wonderful to be back. And I would be remiss if I didn't come with my usual tsunami of thanks to our loyal listeners and a hearty welcome to our new ones. Thank you for being our motivator and the reason for bringing out the best in us. With each episode, we hoped to both entertain you as much as we hope to edify you. We aim to ignite curiosity and foster deeper understanding and conversations. And I would be remiss if I didn't come with my tsunami of thanks and shout out to our creative genius and producers, Kyla Wright and Cavante Smalls. And lastly, I want to say, Emmett, we couldn't be what we be without them. Ain't that right?
That's right. Right on.
It's been you who fueled my dogged faith in our future, even when the odds were great, even when the road is long. Hope in the face of difficulty, hope in the face of uncertainty, the audacity of hope.
In the fall of 2006, almost 20 years ago, Senator Barack Obama published a book entitled The Audacity of Hope, Thoughts on Reclaiming the American Dream, where he discusses the polarization in the United States and the reality that in order to get back to a place of understanding the power of democracy and manifesting its greatness, we need to have the audacity to be hopeful. Irene, how can we muster up the audacity to be hopeful when it seems like we are headed in the absolute wrong direction?
Oh, indeed. And you know, the interesting thing about it, I've been saying that I think for certain demographic groups that have not had to struggle, this becomes a huge task of where do we find hope in the face of hopelessness. But it has played really, as we think about it. We have a page in our civil rights movement, but we also just have a page in our history of being African Americans, because hope really has played a significant role in the lives of African Americans throughout history, from the abolitionist movement to King to now. Of course, we hear that wonderful speech by Obama, and hope has it's just been born of what I call centuries. We understand it, of despair and dehumanization. It has always been the way in which we have hurled hope out in the world as challenging the status quo. And it has just bond us really, not only in our shared, aspirations, but also in our shared moving forward towards a future together. I mean, I don't know how to do anything without that seed of hope. And when we talk about the audacity hope, we know that it implies really that we have no reason to hope. I mean, really, when we think about our lives, here, but that it is that sign. It's in that absence, and of believing there's no reason that we find hope to move forward. It's what gets me up in the morning. It's what makes me know that even if I have a bad day today, I can be hopeful for tomorrow. I mean, how do you think about it? It helps me to not be cynical and not optimistic in the world. How do you deal with it?
Well, you and I have just celebrated birthdays. Our birthdays are 2 days apart, and I think our listeners have been listening to us long enough to know that we are 2 decades apart. I'm not going to give any numbers, and so I I will personally say that you give me hope because of your sense of humor and your sense of not only learnedness and even as an erudite in the best way possible. You have this sense of being real about everything and being straightforward about everything, but also not giving up. And so not only your life story, but your presence and your present tense is about not giving up. And for somebody who's standing on your shoulders,
Oh,
that gives me hope, right?
oh,
And so when I think about, how I manifest this sense of not giving up and not throwing in the towel, I have to look at the ancestors, the elders, my mentors, my parents, those folks who I love, who I know had more difficult challenges or perhaps even worse challenges. And they didn't focus so much on the challenges that were in front of them. They focused on the vision that they had for their loved ones or their progeny and
yeah.
their children, their nieces and nephews or grandchildren. And so I am the manifestation of all those folks who have loved me in the past, who put everything on the line so that I can be where I am, who I am, and manifest the things that I know that I'm on the planet to do.
Yeah.
And so when I'm focusing on that, I don't have time to
To not
get,
be hopeful.
you know
Yeah,
what I mean?
yeah. But
I just don't
so
have time.
interesting though, because number one, thank your parents for me. Okay.
Will do, will
Thank your
do.
parents
And you
for
know that
me.
you know they love
I
you.
love them too here because they raised a wonderful man in the world here, and when I say that, I don't, I really, I always have said to you, I don't just love you, I love the type of man you walk in the world, but that has a lot to do with the way in which your folks have instilled hope in you. And one of the things that we understand within the African American context is that hope has always been intergenerational. We have lived as we climb, with that boulder of hope, and the interesting thing about the way in which hope manifests, it's not just a mood, but it's always been a praxis and an action to move forward. So it's very, very interesting when folks ask me, well, where's the hope, and someone wants me to write a column about hope, I says, well, it will either fall, it will resonate for some, and it will fall flat for others. So we have the bandwidth because we've always made a way out of no way. So it seemed, but didn't understand that we were girded by hope and faith, the interchangeability of the two,
Yeah.
how they dovetail each other. The hope is, and you give me hope because you are the future generation. And yes, we're 2 days and 2 centuries. I want to say
Well, two,
2
two decades, not centuries
centuries.
now.
Okay, I want to say
Look, you ain't that
two
old.
centuries. But I do. But I want to say that I say that intentionally because you're more Afrofuturistic. So I think of that in terms of centuries here. Your century and your decade faces a more Afrofuturistic with Wakanda and all the sorts of stuff out here. My generation wasn't that. My generation was about knocking down doors that have been closed, and so we've been so situated in this context, or in this place call America, but you folks have been more Pan-African, and we see that like with something like Wakanda. I'm using that because most people know that, and more Afrofuturistic, and that Afrofuturism comes out of hope, and it comes out of the seeds that your folks planted in you, so that you can have a better future for your kids and your kids,
Yeah.
which I have met, have that sort of, they're like trailblazers of hope, and of a new hope. And it's not even an audacity. They take it for granted, of course. How else can we move forward if there is no hope here? So we don't fall into that despair, because we understood, I feel like, as we understood, as we were on those slave boats, we don't know where we're going, but we got the hope to build a better future for us. We don't know how, even don't know, that's where we get, don't know how we're going to do it. But there's hope, enough of us, that we can manifest what we hope for.
Wow. We're going to take a break because you have said a lot. I'm feeling a lot. And we need to let our listeners and our viewers process just for a little bit. This is the All Rev'd Up podcast, and we'll be right back.
They're tearing it down. Good.
They are not tearing it down. I bought this building.
This is the All Rev'd Up podcast. We are back, and you just heard a very quick snippet of Marvel's Black Panther closing scene as T'Challa and Shuri return to the place where their father killed their uncle to redeem the family narrative and to expand the impact and influence of Wakanda in the United States. A dark moment that turned bright and brilliant light because of the audacity of hope. Matter of fact, the first opening segment you heard was President Barack Obama in July of 2016 at the Democratic National Convention as the outgoing 44th president of the United States. Irene, how do we put President Obama's phenomenal speech and this closing scene of the Black Panther together?
I think what they both exemplified is what I would describe as strategic hope. It's putting hope into action. So instead of waiting for something to improve, they actually had a long game. And I think when you look at Obama, particularly campaign, we saw the long game of that. As a community, activist. So it's the whole idea of today I can't speak here, not enough coffee, but to prioritize community and connections here. And so, people talk about feeling isolated and that the world is chaotic. And so it's where you put your focus, because the world, as I have always seen it, has always been chaotic. And there always have been bad bearers of news and of action, as we constantly have seen in the beginning of this year and of 2025. But we have, as I speak about it within the African American tradition that I know of here, our focus had to be strategic. And we had to have a game plan. So they're talking about, and I love it in terms of Wakanda, because see, when we talk about Afrofuturism, we're thinking about going to space. No, we're talking about a better future that is in many ways very Afrocentric in terms of what are we able to do in this moment. So what is, the Black Panther doing in this moment? He went back and said these dilapidated buildings that Shuri says, they're going to tear it down. He says, no, I bought them. So we do what we can do. Some of us, and this is where we get into when we talk about Black, futurism, and we're talking about hope. We have Black philanthropy. That's a form of Black philanthropy. We have agency. You do what you can. We have organizations like the NAACP, so it's the way in which we strategically gird ourselves, take care of ourselves in this moment. Like I went to the Galapagos, come back with some renewed energy for having been on the equator, come back and say, this is what I can do. And what I can't do, you know what I do, Emmett? I throw it to you. You're that younger generation that will take it to the finish line. I've run a marathon. and I've run relays. So I know how to just stop, at the 100-yard line and let you run the rest. And then
No,
and throw to our producers. They're even younger.
they're even younger. I appreciate that. First of all, rest in peace, Chadwick Boseman, phenomenal human being, humanitarian, philanthropist, all the things that you said. And one of the things I loved about learning about him, I did not know him personally, but he did all of those things quietly.
Yeah.
He was not about the shine or the glamour or the glitter. He was about doing the work. And I think that that's exactly what you're talking about. We have phenomenal human beings who have been doing the work for many years. And sometimes they're behind the scenes, behind the radar. Sometimes they're anonymous. And so the hope in all of this and the audacity of hope is, how do we envision our part? On that relay race you talk about, are we the second leg, the third leg, or the finish? How do we envision, and how do we get ourselves to the place of being prepared to run our leg of the race, to do our part?
Yeah.
If we have no hope, then we will not show up.
Yeah.
And we will not participate.
And the thing that I have, because I constantly get from different folks, and hearing it a lot, living here in Cambridge, and they would say, well, where's the hope? But I always look at the people that are asking me that. Yes. And that is always interesting because, I say, if you don't know struggle, if you come from a place of privilege, whether it's gender privilege or racial privilege, and not look at how people who are disenfranchised have survived in the face of your privilege, then you're missing the mark of doing what I call that intersectional work, and also privileging those voices and strategic actions that have worked for our survival. I don't think that a present generation of folks here, because what has happened here, it has shifted where the target used to be just Black people. I mean, I'm of the civil rights movement. It is everybody. It is everybody. Okay, it's everybody. So people who've had privilege are aghast that they no longer have that privilege to rest on, and to help them through this moment. Anybody can be targeted at this, as we see. Anybody can lose their lives. I didn't grow up, and you didn't grow up with active shooter drills. This is a new moment. No one would ever think of going to college, and particularly Ivy League college, and getting shot. So this is a new moment. But it's new only because you haven't looked at the voices and the people who have been subjugated and in through history, but is still here. That is still here. I'm not saying that we hold the answer, but I do feel that as African Americans, we hold a answer because we've been here this long and continue to be.
Well, the reality is that every social, political, economic movement in some way, shape, or form in the United States of America, gender, have looked to the Black community to see how we have done before. Whether it's how have we moved, from enslavement to, so-called liberation. How do we move from plantation economy to urban economy? How have we moved? Have we migrated? How have we gone from place to place and created communal senses and sensibilities of survival beyond thriving? And so the reality is that in this moment where we are all oppressed, where we are all suffering, right? We're all suffering.
Right.
How do we not do the old crab in the barrel thing? And how do we look to each other and say that we actually have the autonomy and the audacity in this moment to hope for a better future for everybody? Because if we all collectively decided that enough is enough and that we're not going to do the divide and conquer piece, we're not going to do the us's and the thems, then we actually can put a stop to the majority of the foolishness that we are watching on a daily basis.
But the point is this, though, you see. This is what, and I've always say to folks here, it's very simple. Like, when folks here in Cambridge ask me, I said, do you know your neighbor? Do you know your neighbor? I said, now, your neighbor may have voted, for the man in office or may not. But what is a common thing here that we can all work on? A broken light on the street. Now, that's something. Potholes.
A pothole,
Okay,
yep.
the potholes. All of, these sort of things. will bring people together across their differences here. But I don't, but you know, but see, we have, there's this, and I don't mean this in a bragging way. We have centuries of having to do that. We don't like
Yes.
everybody in our community, but we know how to get on the bus. Okay? Come on now. Get on this picket line. Come on now. Okay? Don't like them. Okay? Don't won't sit next to them in church. But we know that no, but it's the truth. But we come under a common umbrella of oppression and wanting liberation. And
I,
so that's how we have to do that.
I'm so proud of you because I know you well enough that you was almost about to start dropping names. You were about to go there. I felt it in your spirit. And so that's why
Don't
I'm
like
cutting
'em.
you off because you about to drop sister such and such who
And
sit on
brother
the third row.
such, don't like them.
Look, I'm not letting you do that today
And can't
because
sing
we
either.
and see, I'm gotta
That's
stop.
it.
I gotta stop you. I gotta stop you because you gonna go there.
Yeah.
I need you to have the audacity of hope, Irene, today, so that we're not
The
throwing none of our
audacity of
siblings.
silence.
We're not throwing none of our
No
siblings under
shade.
any buses.
That's
You done already talked
but
about get on the bus,
that's
not under
right.
the bus.
That's right. But the
Let,
point is that we march on. That's the
we
point.
march on.
We march
That's
on.
it.
That's it.
That's it. Well, let us march on. I have a closing word for us. Big Sister Maya Angelou once said, "Hope and fear cannot occupy the same space." So she said, invite one to stay. President Barack Obama once said, "Hope is not blind optimism. Hope is that thing inside us that insists that something better awaits us." The great Desmond Tutu once said, "Hope is being able to see that there is light despite all of the darkness." Beloved, we are all in dark times. Not some of us, all of us. And one of the big decisions we have is whether we will bow down and give in or whether we will have the audacity to hope for a better future for all of us. The great prophet James Baldwin once reminded us that hope is invented every day. But the question is, do we believe it? Do we embrace it? And do we realize it? Perhaps the legendary congressman and activist John Lewis encourages us to not get lost in the sea of despair. Be hopeful. Be optimistic. With all of the wisdom of these legends, I offer my final word. Take every day as a new opportunity to love on yourself, and then as a reflection, love on others. Be courageous and confident in who you were created to be, based on your ongoing conversation with the divine, not anyone else. And then reflect that courage and confidence in your relationships with one another. Be the change you want to see, starting with taking responsibility for the decisions and actions that you control and the interactions that reflect your care for self and your care for one another. We can change the world if we have the courage and confidence to do so. We have models, we have mentors, and we have plenty of shoulders to stand on, including the aforementioned who I quoted. I'm standing on Reverend Irene Monroe's shoulders, and beloved, her shoulders are strong, steady, and stable. Let us all have the audacity of hope. Here's to a hopeful 2026. Amen
Amen.
and Ashe.
Ashe.
All Rev'd Up is brought to you by us, the Revs. Our amazing producers are Kyla Wright and Cavante Smalls. Our sponsors are us and Africana Studies at Berkeley and the Black Christian Experience Resource Center.
Music for this episode is from Emmett G. Price IV. All Rev'd Up is distributed by GBH. If you like what you hear, let us know. Give us a review on Apple Podcasts and follow us at All Rev'd Up Pod on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube.
And feel free to send us a note, a question, or even a comment to allrevveduppod@gmail.com. We'll be back in 2 weeks for another episode of All Rev'd Up.